And in a couple of minutes, I'll turn this over to Rabbi Knight, who will introduce him. I just wanted to point out that we have 3 more programs coming up. 2 weeks from today, what is and is not Southern about Texas Jews, which I'm looking forward to because I have family who came to Texas in the 1840s, and I'm interested to hear all about this. And Dr. Joshua Furman is his reputation as a great speaker, especially on this topic. Wednesday, June 2nd, looking back, looking forward, the Black-Jewish relationship with our favorite Rabbi Emerita, Judy Schindler. And as always, we'll conclude the year with music. And on June 16th, we're going to have jazz with Noel Friedline. Noel is a great pianist. He's with Beckler, the Ziad Quartet, who plays at Jazz the Beckler. And we've heard him playing there for a decade now. And he also is a great teacher and a lot of fun as well. And I know you're all really going to enjoy that. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Rabbi Knight, who will introduce Rabbi Weinberg. Rabbi?
Thanks, Bob. I want to thank Spice and everyone for having another awesome session, and also a great calendar. Really looking forward to the future, all the future Spice events. So I want to sort of preface the opportunity today to learn with a colleague and a friend. And I want to just preface it by saying that over the last couple of months, I've received lots of questions from actually Spice members around what's happening in Israel. And I love talking about Israel, lived in Israel for 2 years of my life, and have been an ardent supporter of many different types of, whether it's Reform Zionism and Reform movement in Israel, or it's been AIPAC or other things. People know that I have a deep affinity for Israel, and always happy to talk about Israel. But the reason why people are asking are for a variety of reasons. One is that in March, a Supreme Court decision was made that about Reform conversion and acceptance of Reform conservative conversion in Israel, and a lot of people have had questions about the implications of all of that on Jews here in the United States, but also Reform Jews in Israel. In addition to that, people have been looking at the political situation in Israel, and have had lots of questions about the political situation in Israel because of all of the elections, and there was huge news yesterday about the politics in Israel. People have been interested about that, and so when we talked about how me speaking of Israel, I thought I can speak all I want, but the truth is it'd be really great to hear from someone who's an expert who has their feet on the ground in the United States, but also in Israel, and can help us bridge the gap and understand it. And so we invited Rabbi Josh Weinberg to be here today. Josh is a colleague and a friend, and has been for many years, since known each other through in our sort of nifty days. His father is a rabbi who's been an absolute friend to me in terms of the work that we've done in the Central Conference of American Rabbis. His aunt was the first, was actually one of the presidents of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and also has been such a wonderful influence in the Reform movement. And Rabbi Josh Weinberg, in his own right, serves as the vice president of the Union for Reform Judaism for Israel, and the Reform Zionism, and is also the executive director of ARZA, which is the Association of Reform Zionists of America. I could go through all of his educational accomplishments and his professional accomplishments, but I think what's really important to understand is that Rabbi Weinberg is really one of our leaders when it comes to Reform Zionism, Americans who support Israel, and the Reform movement. And I am just thrilled to have Rabbi Weinberg here today.
Hey. Thank you. Boker Tov, everybody. I think it's still morning, right? It's where we are. But Boker Tov, and thank you so much, Rabbi Knight, for that wonderful introduction. And I wish my mom was here to hear that. Although I do see a guy named Mike Weinberg on here with us, which is also my dad's name. So nice to see you. I don't think we're related, but okay. What I want to say is that, first of all, I'm just very, very thrilled to be with you in Charlotte, and I'm only sorry that well, let's say hopefully one day I can come and be there in person as well, and just to see what you've built in the past few years, Rabbi Knight, and the wonderful community that you have there. And I'm also doing some of our progressive Zionist, social justice Zionist work with Rabbi Schindler as well out of Charlotte, and that's been a wonderful partnership to do that. We're going to try and cover a lot of different topics in a short time, I think, what we're going to do. And so just, how many of you have been to Israel before? Okay. How many people, what we call repeat offenders, and that you've gone multiple times to Israel? You've gone, okay, great. How many of you have been in the last 5 years? Okay, how many of you, it's been kind of a while? Okay, so that's great. So it's changing, and sometimes, and also, how many of you are feeling somewhat confused about the Israeli political situation these days? Right now, anyone sharing that, like what the hell is going on? And like I say, like this, Israel, I don't know if you would know this, but on May 22nd, there were meant to be Palestinian elections in the Palestinian Authority. They have not had national elections in 16 years. And we in Israel have had them every Monday and Thursday for the past 2 years. No, I'm just kidding, but we have had 4 elections in the past 2 years. And so, like, between the two of us, maybe we could trade off and share a little bit. It is a changing thing, and we're going to talk about that because last night at midnight, midnight Israel time, the deadline or the period of time that Prime Minister Netanyahu had to form a new coalition expired. Okay, for those of you who have kids and maybe grandkids, if you remember that moment in the movie Cinderella, okay, or in the book, whatever, when like the clock strikes midnight and then they turn back into a pumpkin and like poof, okay, that's exactly what happened just a few hours ago. And so it's a big question what's going to happen. Let me preface that before we get into some of the specifics, and really, we're a nice intimate group. Feel free to to throw a question in the chat, and I'll ask either Tracy or Natalie or Rabbi Knight if I don't see a question, if you do,
I will do that. And also, if you want to private chat me a question, you can do that too.
Yeah. Feel free if you'd like to be anonymous. That is totally cool. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, but what I want to say here, let me just start sharing my screen. Just by way of introduction, that I, as a Rabbi Knight said, I grew up very much in the Reform movement. I grew up just outside of Charlotte in a town called Chicago. And for me, as a seeker, I was looking for the answer to sort of like what my Jewish identity would be. And for me, Israel was the answer to my identity. And I came to Israel wanting to be a secular nationalist. Actually, I just wanted to live in Israel and live in, in a predominantly Jewish culture. And what I realized was that, first of all, okay, what is now my Zionism? Is Zionism over? Having achieved its goal on May 14th, 1948, 73 plus years ago, and that the goal was to establish a sovereign political entity in our ancestral homeland. So check the box, we did that. Now what? Then I came to the conclusion, no, it's not over. And what was going to be my Zionism? Well, everyone told me, stop being a romantic idealist and wanting to drain the swamps and work the land like the pioneers of 100 years ago. And you should really go into high tech, because how many of you have seen the book or read it, Startup Nation? Many of you might be familiar. It's a book about 10 years ago that came out. And so that's where we are leading the world right now in technology and advancement and all that stuff. So you should do that. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I'm a Jewish educator. I didn't know what to do. And so I came to the conclusion that we could not actually no longer do what the early Zionists did and completely disengage, completely separate and disconnect Jewish nationalism from the Jewish religion. That was what happened in the early years, especially with the labor Zionist socialist movement that came and settled the land of Israel, and not really the first, but really the second Aliyah. That was the ethos, to say we are secular now. We've given up that exilic, right? That religion, that ritual that came with the diaspora. That's a thing of the past. Now we are going to reinvent ourselves. They even called ourselves the new Jew, HaYehudi HaChadash in Hebrew. And religion, we don't need that. Have you ever heard this be referred to when you ask Israelis to talk about Jewish history, right? Here, I'll just stop for a second. They would say, oh, we learn from the Tanakh to the Palmach. Have you ever heard that before? Anybody ever heard that, right? So the Tanakh is the Bible, okay? And the Palmach was one of the underground, pre-state militias. Okay, stands for Plugat Machat, or oh, sorry. It was, the early years. So they say we go from the Bible, right, from the Torah, the Tanakh, all the way up to modern stuff, but they would skip everything in between. Like that small period of 2,000 years when we didn't have sovereignty. Okay, between 70 in the year CE, when the temple was destroyed, up until, let's pick it 1897 or something, when the first Zionist Congress took place, and we started to rebuild ourselves as a national movement. And we're thinking like, well, wait a second, how many of you have met Israelis before? You've all met Israelis, yeah. Whether they're selling Ahava products in your local shopping mall or they're your cousin, whatever. So if you were, let's say in the 1950s, if you were to ask Israelis who their heroes were, okay, they would say something like, oh, King David, or Yoav, who is the general of King David in the book of Shmuel. Or they would say, Bar Kochva, or skip to modern, or anyone who has the last name of hero, like Samson in the Bible, in the book of Judges, Shimshon Hagibor is how he's referred to in Hebrew. Or fast forward to modern times, and they would pick like, Moshe Dayan, or Jabotinsky, or, some of the war heroes, or, Trumpeldor of Israel. Who would they not say? Like, oh, my hero is the Baal Shem Tov or Rambam or something like that. You would not likely hear Israelis refer to great Torah scholars as their heroes, especially those who come from outside of Israel. And that, I think, is slowly starting to change. Okay, so what all that is to say, I want to posit the challenges that we are seeing as the reform movement, okay, or the challenges to liberal Judaism as being deeply seated in what Israeli Judaism is, okay? Before we even get to the conversion issue, before we even get to some of the political issues of the, religious coercion of the ultra-Orthodox, all right, I want us to understand that Israelis see Judaism in a very, very different way than we in the diaspora, particularly that we in North America happen to see Judaism. What I want to do is I'm going to go through a little bit. I want to actually start, hang on, let's not start with politics, okay? Let's get there. What I want to start with is just sort of like a basic background on, now I have to, just fast forward to the right slide here. There we go. I want to start with some of the tensions that exist. So Rabbi Knight, what I want to ask you is if you could give us like a 10-minute frame. We're going to do this part in about 10 minutes. Yep. Okay. And then we'll pivot to like really current events. Okay. Yep.
So do you want me to keep time for you?
Would you? That would be
that's
great.
Because happy to.
And I don't know if you've ever met any rabbis who like either are overly loquacious or go on tangents or tell us. I've never met anyone like that, but just in case, that sometimes happens. So let's ask the question: when we talk about a Jewish state, what was the vision? And I want to set up that the Jewish state, the state of Israel, was a complicated, conflict-ridden product of multiple visions of what the Jewish state should be. And let's lay out the basic. Anybody recognize that bearded gentleman in the bottom left-hand corner there? Raise your hand or unmute, throw it out or throw it in the chat, like, whatever.
Herzl?
Herzl, yes, very good. Like some things as, the First World Zionist Congress and the Coen brothers movie, The Big Lebowski, who I'm sure that's how most people know about him. So Herzl had this vision of what the Jewish state would be, and he wrote, in the tradition of great 19th century pamphleteers, he wrote a short pamphlet, about 100 pages, in German called Der Judenstaat. Okay, any German speakers here? Good Reform Jews. We should know the original German. How would you translate into English the title Der Judenstaat in German? Any ventures here?
Yeah, the Jewish state.
Yeah. Wait, who said that? I missed.
Your non-relative, Mike.
Yeah. Oh,
Weinberg.
Mike. Yeah. Of course. My dad. Okay. Close. You said the Jewish state. Okay. Close. It's famously been mistranslated as the Jewish state, but here grammar is very, very important, because in German that would be der Jüdischstaat. German's like English. Okay, it's the same structure. So Jude is Jew, and like we know that from the Holocaust, right, where people would have to write on their yellow stars Jude, right, Jude. Juden is plural, so it actually means the Jews' state, without an apostrophe. It's not possessive. So what does that actually mean? Let's translate that into more idiomatic English. What we're talking about is a state of Jews. I'll give it to you in Hebrew. It's Medinat HaYehudim, the state of the Jews, and not Medina Yehudit. It's, what's the adjective and what's the noun there? So Herzl envisioned that this would be a state where a majority of Jewish people would live. Okay. And in this corner, as what's the guy from the wrestling show used to say, and in this corner, you have Herzl's ideological rival, right? Anybody recognize that guy over here, the bespectacled guy with the wispy goatee there? He's less well known, to the world. His pen name was Achad Ha'am, one of the people. Okay, I'll put it for you here in the chat in English. He grew up, his name was Asher Ginsburg, of course, and he saw it very differently. He said, no, I don't care about political sovereignty. What I want is a Jewish society, okay, that would be based on Jewish culture. He called it spiritual Zionism, Tzionut Ruchanit. He didn't mean exactly what we might understand to be spiritual today. He didn't say like you should all go meditate and do yoga on a mountaintop somewhere. Like, okay, no, that wasn't his, and we should all sing nigunim and take deep breaths. Like, no, he said though, this is cultural Judaism. How many of you have ever met someone who would identify as a cultural Jew? I'm not so religious. I'm a cultural Jew in America, right? Like, what do they mean by that when they say that? Could be you yourself. I don't know. Not rhetorical, actually. What do people mean when they say that? I'm a cultural Jew. Okay, I'll give it to you. Here's what they mean. And apologies ahead of time for the gross generalization. They mean, I don't like going to shul. I don't, keep kosher or Shabbat, but boy, give me a good bagels and lox. I love kugel and Lukshin and and I live in Boca Raton, something like that. I'm from Long Island, like whatever. That's essentially what they mean. And I like to sprinkle my English with a bit of Yiddish, and I feel deeply Jewish. Okay, did I get it? Okay, is that like, would you? Yeah, more or less, right? Okay, right. What Achad Ha'am meant by a cultural Jew, okay, is something quite different. Okay, he said, we need to live according to Jewish time. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to show up 10 minutes late. Okay, that's not what that means. He means we need to live according to the Jewish calendar and to speak the Jewish language. He said Jewish literature, Ahad Ha'am would not have considered Philip Roth and Bernard Malamud and Saul Bellow and think about the contemporaries today like Jonathan Safran or Dara Horn or Nicole Krauss, like that kind of stuff. He would not have considered that Jewish literature because it was not written in a Jewish language. Okay, Besheva Singer, yes, Yiddish is a Jewish language. He said we need to do that. We need to live where our holidays are the national holidays, where the ATM wishes you Shabbat Shalom every week. And he famously coined the term that more than Shabbat, more than Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. And he said, when I studied the Talmud, okay, which of course everybody reads the Tanakh and reads the Talmud. He says, I'm doing so not looking at it as an instruction manual for how to live my life, right? I'm not looking at it for answers of like Rabbi, how much time must I wait, after I had a meat meal to I can eat milk. He's like, I'm not interested in that. But I am deeply interested in informing who I am, I have a dialogue with the ancient rabbis because they're part of my culture, right? And we need to have sort of what, if you remember, like you guys remember the 80s? There was a famous book that came out called The Closing of the American Mind in about 1987 or so, Alan Bloom, where he said, we need to have a cultural literacy, okay? He's been since debunked and rejected, but essentially now what Ahad Ha'am is saying, we need to have a cultural literacy. Of course we have to use the Tanakh. Of course we have to use the Talmud and the evolution of the Jewish bookshelf and all of that. That's our culture, okay? And here I want to give a plug for the Hebrew language, because language is a carrier of culture. And even if you're totally non-observant, okay, you have a deep sense of culture. And if you want at the end, if we have time, I'll be happy to pepper you with examples of how this plays out in a culture, because it's wonderful. And this is the magic of Israel, which is often missed from the tour bus. Okay, you want one example real quick? Yeah, I know we'll go over time. Okay, so in English, let's pick on Mike Weinberg because it's fun. Okay, Mike, if I ask you, pretend you don't have a name tag there, and I say, hey, nice to meet you. What's your name? Okay, and you want to be slightly cheeky and cute with me, and you'll say to me, what's in a name? Does a rose not, smell just as sweet if you call it by a different, whatever the Shakespeare line is, right? Like, shouldn't a rose smell just as sweet by another name? And like, you want to be cute with me. And they say, right, that's Shakespeare because I went to high school in America and everyone knows that. Okay, you recognize the reference? Okay. How do you say that in Jewish? Okay, I'll give you an example in Hebrew. Okay. Mike, here's what I would say. If I have bad news for you, I'm going to tell you something in English like this. I'm going to say, Mike, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is you're going to live. The bad news is, not for so long. Okay, so that's how I would say it. In Hebrew, I want to say this. We're going to need like a 5-minute extension on this on this subject. In Hebrew, I would say to you, Mike, יש לי בשבילך בשורות איוב. Okay, Mike, I bring for you the tidings of Job. Okay, now, everybody remember who Job is in the Bible, in the Tanakh? Okay, even if you haven't, now, even if an Israeli who has never read the book of Job and barely remembers the story about the deal that Job went into with God and how he suffered terribly through his faith and his whole family and the whole story, okay? You can look it up. They know that what I'm about to say is bad, Okay, they know that's part of the collective conscience. So Achad Am was all about that, and they disagreed. So what we have is tensions between the vision of the Jewish state. And we have a Jewish state according to the labor Zionists here, like these guys, or is it a Jewish state according to these guys? Okay, the ultra-Orthodox who say, wait a second, we have a constitution and it's called the Torah, right? Or halacha, Jewish law. And we say, okay, we signed up for a Jewish and democratic state. If I wanted to live by Torah law, we could go to live under the mullahs of Afghanistan or Iran or something like that. Yeah, that's not what we signed up for. We signed up for democracy. Now, how do we mark these tensions? Well, that comes in understanding a little bit about where Israeli Judaism comes from. Let's look at this. I'm gonna skip this for a second. We're just gonna go to, don't worry about all this stuff. Okay, here we go. Okay, I want to maintain in the 2 minutes I have left in this section here, which I totally just made up, is I want to suggest to you that Israeli Judaism is a descendant of two Judaisms. Okay, and this is also a gross generalization because you'll tell me that that your uncle Nahum in Haifa doesn't fit into these categories, and you'll be right. Okay, and fair enough. But what I want to maintain is just a broad generalization. So the first Judaism is Ashkenazi Judaism. Now, under Ashkenazi Judaism, I want to suggest two different polar opposites. First, Ashkenazi Judaism produced the secular labor socialist workers' party. Okay, remember Israel had the Labor Party, still does kind of. Okay, that came about, and by the way, look at that poster. What are you thinking to yourself about that poster, about that image? Funny, it doesn't look Jewish, right? Anybody occur to you and definitely not, right? What does that person look like to you? Usually one of two options there. Think about this was produced in the 1930s, by the way. So does it look Aryan to anyone? Or Soviet Bolshevik? Yes, and that was the model. Okay, they are not going to put a poster up of Woody Allen and saying, "Come join us," and bring your neuroses, with you. No, okay. Anybody have any allergies? Okay, no, that's not the image that they were trying to build. That was the secular revolution. But Eastern European Judaism also produced the Haredi world. Okay, and that the political party called Agudat Yisrael, which is the foundation of the main Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox party, that was already a political party that served in the Polish parliament from the 1920s. Okay, so that came also, which is, by the way, also a reaction to modernity. I don't know if you know this, but Moses, when he crossed the Red Sea, was not wearing a black fur hat and a black suit, okay? I wasn't there, I don't know, but I can say, and neither was the Rambam in 12th century Egypt. Okay, the second Judaism that Israel produced is what we call Mizrahi Judaism, or Eastern, and this means, or Eastern or Near Eastern, anyone who came from North Africa, what we call, the Middle East right now, Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, Morocco to Egypt, that whole area, okay? And that is usually the mass wave of immigration that came in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Hundreds of thousands of Jews fled Arab lands and Arab countries to come to Israel, some also evicted, and it also produced what we now have, right, as the Shas, the ultra-Orthodox Sephardic party. Okay, now, what do these two Judaisms have in common? Okay, the Ashkenazi and the Mizrahi. Okay, quite a bit, actually, I would say. And I'm gonna offer three suggestions for what they have in common. The first is that they always maintained a Jewish language. Okay, and I'll get off my soapbox about the importance of a Jewish language, and I'll just say that that was their framing. whether it was Yiddish or Ladino or Judeo-Arabic, okay, and that's one. The second thing is that for them, even if they were secular, and there were secular Jews in Poland and in Morocco, okay, non-observant Jews, traditional Judaism, what we would call today Orthodox Judaism, was always what they understood to be authentic Judaism. And the third is that they, neither in Eastern Europe or in North Africa, did they experience the Enlightenment like we did in Western Europe, okay, like Germany, France, you know, the Netherlands, England, all that stuff. And that's what got, for the most part, exported to America. Think about your area, Charleston, South Carolina, right? It's not, you know, right next door to you, but like the first synagogue in America was established by German Jews, and that's the tradition. Even though the majority of Jews in America today are descendants from this Judaism, from Eastern Europe, okay, the German Jewish tradition of, you know, Reform Judaism is the majority of America, the American experience. And that is, and still with that, they, both in Eastern Europe and in America and in North Africa, they maintained Judaism or Jewishness as their nationality, okay? They would not say, oh, I'm Polish and he's Catholic and I'm Jewish, like we would in America today. They would say that, you know, oh, I'm a Jew and he's a Pole, or I'm a Jewish and she's Moroccan, something like that. So it's different. And it is different than what we commonly know, we commonly experience, okay? And so that the Reform tradition of egalitarianism, and Rabbi Knight, I'm going to go out on a limb here and to say, you know, are most of your sermons in English?
So far, 100% of
wow,
are in English. Yes,
and not in the original German, right? Okay, like,
no, nope.
That's amazing. Yeah,
they're German in my head,
okay,
but
right,
not,
of course,
they're
yeah,
English.
So that the musical style that we've adopted, you know, and there's Debbie Friedman, of course, is like that is largely unfamiliar to many Israelis. Okay, now that's all by way of setup, okay, to understand, okay, the backbone of Israeli Judaism. And Lee, I don't know if you had a question, if you're on mute or you wanted to say. I just saw you, you know, talking into the screen, but feel free to ask a question, because what I want to set up is that the infusion of liberal movements into Israel, okay, and by the way, there's much more. We could do a whole semester's course on just this, but there's much more to say about it. But I want to say is that Reform and this Judaism was just largely unfamiliar to people. Okay, while we may take it for granted, right? This did not fit into the, you know, the purview of what Israelis understood to be Judaism. Okay? Because remember, our congregations in North America were largely influenced by the Protestant church. Okay. Where we put the bima, the kind of music, the pews, all of that, like that, you know, and I'm not giving that a value. I have an opinion on that, but I'm not giving that a value judgment. I just want that to be a sociological understanding to see how that's different in Israel, you know, for what we understand. Now let's say a word about politics and leading up to the major ruling of about a month ago in the courts. Now, what happened around leading up to the beginning of the state? Okay, when Ben-Gurion, and like stop me again if something is unclear, when David Ben-Gurion was getting ready to establish the state of Israel, the ultra-Orthodox parties and the leadership of the ultra-Orthodox world was very, very concerned that religion, okay, the state religion, would be swept by the wayside with the establishment party, which was the secular, socialist labor Zionists. Okay. So in 1947, and I have to put that in white so you can see it on the 19th of June in 1947, David Ben-Gurion issued a letter to the ultra-Orthodox leadership in which he said, essentially, we are going to keep the status quo. What does that mean by the status quo? That since the Ottoman Empire, okay, and then all throughout the British Mandate, which was 1922 to 1948, okay, all matters of religious ruling, okay, which had to do with 4 specific areas, okay, they would all still fall under the official chief rabbinate. And the only thing that he changed was that after the establishment of the state, there are now 2 official chief rabbis, one Ashkenazi and one Sephardic, okay? And this has gone into history. We refer to this in Hebrew as the status quo, okay? Haskema status quo. So if you hear Israeli friends, they'll be very impressed that you can say status quo in Hebrew, and it is status quo, okay? That's a tough crowd here, Rabbi Knight. That's supposed to be funny. I don't know. Okay, what did the status quo agreement entitle? Essentially, it outlined 4 things. 1, Shabbat is the official day of rest of the Jewish state. All official governmental things should have a kashrut standard to all keep kosher. Here's the big one. You see letter C there, and I can make this smaller if it's easier for you to see there. Is that essentially what we call in Hebrew dinei ishut, or personal status issues. And there are 4 specific personal status issues: conversion to Judaism, marriage, divorce, and burial. Okay, those would be controlled by the Orthodox / ultra-Orthodox chief rabbin. Okay. All right, everyone got that so far? And that has been the status up until today. Sorry, up until early March. Okay, now, what happened with that? In 1989, and then subsequently a further ruling in 1995, the Supreme Court said that they will recognize conversions officiated under the auspices of non-Orthodox rabbis, Reform and conservative rabbis abroad, okay? So if you or your nephew or whoever converted to Judaism with Rabbi Knight or Rabbi Schindler or whatever, the state of Israel, and here I wanna be specific here, the Ministry of the Interior, for purposes of citizenship in Israel, we have a law called the Law of Return, where any Jew can claim citizenship. What's the next logical question that you have to ask then? If I said any Jew can come and claim citizenship.
Are you Jewish?
Are you Jewish, or who is a Jew, right? And then the next question after that is, well, who has the authority to determine who is a Jew? Okay, think like lawyers and Talmudists here, because that's who made these laws, right? I'm not going to get into that right now, but for a few decades already, we've been allowed, our Reform rabbis in the United States and North America can convert people who then can go and make aliyah and become citizens to Israel. But for the first time in the history of the state of Israel, okay, the Supreme Court ruled just about 6 weeks ago that they would recognize Israeli Reform and conservative conversions. Okay, and people said to me, well, how many people does it actually affect? I said, well, we're talking about 30 or 40 actual individuals. There were 10 specific court cases going on. Okay, I said, but here's the big deal, because this was the first time since June 19th of 1947 that Israel changed this status quo agreement. Okay, that they said, okay, we are now changing this, and we are now giving officially state-sanctioned authority to non-Orthodox rabbis. By the way, do you guys remember the Kotel Agreement of a few years ago, the Western Wall that we kind of made a big deal about, right? Let me break it. It wasn't just about having an egalitarian space there. Okay, that would be nice. And we sort of have it. But what was the bigger deal is that this is the first time the state of Israel was going to recognize Reform and conservative Jews as to have authority over a holy site in Israel. Okay, that was the big deal. That's what's happening right now. Okay, that's why this is such a big deal. Now let's fast forward to politics. Okay, and then in about 5 minutes we'll open it up for questions. Okay, and for discussions. Okay. Let's share the screen again. Here we go. Okay. The big question, and as you know, okay, the big question for everybody is, it's not, the big question that we were going to the polls on is not a right or left divide and what we should do with the Palestinians, two-state solution, not two-state solution, return land, not return land, negotiations. It's not an economic issue about what kind of situation we want to have. It's not even a religious issue. The big question that people are voting on right now is, do you support Netanyahu or do you not? Okay, that's what this all hinges on. And I will maintain, this is my own personal analysis right now, that until Netanyahu is no longer prime minister, we will not see true and genuine ideological debate on the national scene on specific issues. Okay, think about the elections that we just had in the United States. Okay, and I'm not going to ask people's opinion if you were Biden, if you're Trump, if you were whatever. Okay, but there were fundamental issues, I think, that stood at the core of the electoral debate, and also with Congress, with your representatives and with the Senate, about how you feel about certain things, whether it's immigration, environment, gun control, all sorts of issues that were playing out, and it's really an ideological debate. Obviously, there's much more complicated, much more nuanced, and there's personalities involved there as well, and it's not a fair comparison. But I want to say that this is what's going on right now. Now, from our vantage point, okay, Netanyahu, okay, and the clock struck, as he's looking at his watch there. This was very moment because at 11:57 he handed back the mandate to the president of Israel. Remember, in Israel we have a president and a prime minister. Okay, the president is head of state, and the prime minister is head of government. Okay, in the United States of America, the president is both. He's both. He's head of his bureaucracy, of his cabinet, and also head of state. In Israel, it's the president who taps the member of Knesset with the highest chances of being able to form a coalition. Now, how many Knesset members are we looking for to form a majority? What's the minimum that we need? Anybody? Throw it out there.
61.
61, that's the magic number that we're looking for. It's 51% and 61 of 120. This time, Netanyahu could not put together 61, okay? From our point of view, we know that he was going to include the two ultra-Orthodox parties. Let me see if I have it here. Let me just give you this, okay, real quick. And so if you look here at the breakdown, right, you see Likud is 30, the two ultra-Orthodox parties, which is Shas right here. Can you see my cursor at all? No, let me do it like this. Okay, Shas has 9. Okay, can you see it now, the cursor? Okay, Shas has 9, and it got cut off a little bit. This is United Torah Judaism has 7. Okay, together they have 16 seats. And they were going to help make the coalition. They were loyal to Netanyahu. Why? For one reason and one reason only. He promised them what they want. Okay, and that is the specific ministries that they will control and the budgets for their education system. Okay, and what else did he promise? It has to do with us. Okay, that he would not give in to the reformim. That's how we're referred to in Hebrew, okay? That he would not solve this problem of pluralism and tolerance, and and he even said that in about two. I'll show you another slide. He even said that, okay? And they were fine. This is okay. They said we actually don't care what happens with the Palestinians. We don't care about the some of the other national issues. We care about our communities, and we care that you block the reform and conservative movements. And Netanyahu said, okay. And they're also willing to go with him on his attempts at immunity. I don't know if you are aware of this, but he is, sorry, there he is. He is he's in trial now over 3 cases of bribery and corruption right now. And he's trying to work the system. By the way, if he becomes head of the opposition right now, if someone else puts in, forms a coalition, okay, he is going to lose all sort of immunity, and he's not going to have a way to get around the trial, whether he'll actually be found guilty or not. That we'll see. Okay, 2 other critically important pieces to this story is one. Let's say 3 pieces. Okay, let's move back a little bit. One is that Netanyahu, in an attempt to solidify a majority to form a coalition, encouraged the far-right extremist camp. Okay, they formed a new party this time called the Religious Zionist Party, which is made up of 3 different factions coming together, including this gentleman here. Can you see that? His name is, can you see my cursor? His name is Itamar Ben Gvir. Okay, he is a disciple of the late Rabbi Meir Kahane, who some of you remember him. He got assassinated, I think, in November of 1990 in New York City, who is a lot ideologically very far right wing and had run a campaign of racism, misogyny, extremism, some may say fascism, all of that. Another guy here to the left, and I just say the left of the picture, not to the left ideologically, is a guy called Avi Maoz, who ran on a party called Noam. They have 2 agenda items to their platform, essentially. One is a staunchly anti-LGBTQ and hard homophobic platform, and they've put plastered posters and billboards all over Israel saying a normal family is a family with a mother and a father. Okay, that they're totally against same-sex marriages, totally against any of that. And their second agenda is an anti-reform movement agenda, not reform with a capital R, us. Okay, and they put out a billboard in the middle of Tel Aviv saying like this. I'll give it to you in translation. It says, "Reform grandfather equals assimilated father, which equals," they use the G word, which is a pejorative, that they use the word goy, okay, equals non-Jewish grandson. Okay, what they're trying to say is that if you support the reform movement, okay, this is the end of the Jewish people. Okay, and the reform is the exit ramp of Judaism, and we're trying to say, actually, we are the on-ramp to Judaism. It's exactly the opposite of what we're saying, is that there are many more Jews in the world because of the reform movement and not despite them. Now, our movement successfully blocked 3 of these individuals from running in the previous election. They were the Jewish Power Party. Okay, I'm a little bit wary of anyone who puts the word power in their group. Like if you were to replace that with the word white, let's say. Okay, we know exactly what we're dealing with. And there's Meir Kahane on the back scene. But what we also saw recently, sorry for jumping a bit around, is something very, very significant. And that is the election of the first Reform rabbi to the Knesset ever in the history of the state of Israel. Okay, there have only been a few Reform rabbis in the history of the world who have served in government roles. Okay, and here is Rabbi Gilad Kariv. Okay, there he is. He ran on the Labor Party. He came in number 4 in Labor. And then we're going to open up for questions in just 2 minutes. Okay, is that there he is as the rabbi of Beit Daniel here. Well, there it is. And he said the following, and it's a beautiful quote in my opinion. We have made it into Israel's Knesset with our messages, with our values. We're sounding a Jewish egalitarian democratic voice that strives for social justice, loves humanity, and strives for peace. In a couple of hours, okay, I'm going to blast out as much as I can, and I'll send it to, make sure I send it to Rabbi Knight, who can share with all of you, is that just this morning, Gilad, Rabbi Kariv, made his, how do you say, Ne'um HaBechorah in English, his debut speech at the Knesset. Okay, and I just got a text message like an hour ago saying that they are working to put English subtitles onto it so all of us can get it. And this is a tremendous, tremendous achievement for us. Okay, now don't get your hopes up that like he's the Messiah or something like that, and then all problems are going to be solved. He is fighting a huge uphill battle because while we were able to elect a Reform rabbi as a Knesset member, 256,000 Israelis voted for the far right extremists. Okay, but already, I just want to say, part of his opening speech at the Knesset was so emotional because he took this book, which is the brand new Israeli Reform Sidur that just came out a couple of months ago. And Rabbi, I don't know if you've gotten a copy yet.
At home, actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, you're at the shul.
I'm the shul.
Okay. That he stood up. You know what it's like for a rabbi to stand up at the Knesset and open a Reform Sidur and quote from it. Okay, I had tears in my eyes. Watching this, and that's huge. So that's a major accomplishment for us. And he's already out there fighting the good fight, and it's a major thing. Let me end with the following. Now, here's where we are as of about 3 or 4 hours ago. Okay, is that Netanyahu has returned the mandate to form a coalition to the president. The president now has 2 options. Okay, he can tap someone else, right? And if you remember the graph I showed you, Yair Lapid, that is here. I'll circle him. That is that is this guy right. Can you see my cursor or not? I never know. Yeah, okay. That is this guy right here. Okay, he could be tapped to form the next coalition. And as you see, 56 MKs back him for prime minister, including this guy, Gidon Sa'ar, on the right with the glasses. Okay, he broke off from Likud to form his own party called the New Hope, or Tikva Chadasha. Very right-wing guy, but I've met him a few times. I'd like to say that at least he's not corrupt. He's an honest player. You know who you're going to get. And being secular, he may be more favorable of Israeli, Jewish pluralism and equality, even if it may be hard, may take a hard line on some of the security issues, which, again, I'm not giving that a value judgment. We have people in our movement who really span the spectrum from left to right on those issues. The big question is what's going to happen with this guy in the middle, Naftali Bennett. Okay, he heads the party called Yamina, which means rightward. Okay, he's from the religious Zionist camp. He's a little bit more moderate than the extremists that I pointed out to you. And Netanyahu had offered him, like 3 days ago, what they call in Hebrew a rotatia, okay, which you understand, everybody get that, what that means, right? That he would have a rotational prime minister, premiership, where Naftali Bennett would serve for the first year as prime minister. By the way, he offered that to Benny Gantz last year, right? In exactly a year ago when they were forming the government. And Israelis being cynical, they said, okay, let's see how he can get out of it. All right, that's where we are right now. The prime minister could also tap the Knesset and say, if anyone in the Knesset can come up with a coalition, you get it. If it doesn't happen the next 3 weeks, guess what happens, folks?
Elections.
That's right. We go to a fifth elections. Mark your calendars for late August, okay? And we'll come back again after Rosh Hashanah to give another update and analysis as we are. I'm going to stop there, and I have a whopping amount of 5 minutes for Q&A, but I can stay on for a couple minutes if we need to. I know that was a lot of information. I apologize for throwing that at you, but I wanted to, sort of get the bigger picture. Please, Vakasha.
If you have questions, also please put them in the chat box. You can type in the chat box if you want
Absolutely,
as well. Can you hear me okay, or is it echoing?
Try now.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So one question I think that it sort of emerges for me in all of this is your sort of sense about how, what is sort of on what's going to happen with the political reality. I mean, do you think that it seems like the news out of Israel today is that in order to even create a new coalition, it's going to be a combination of really opposing opinions actually choosing to work together. And on one level, it seems like that could be really positive, but another level, it seems like it's hard to even imagine given sort of the state of politics, both in our country and other places. So what's your sort of sense of things? I mean, if you had a glass ball.
Yeah, look, as they say, of all the things that I'm having trouble predicting, the future is one of them. Okay, that joke again. Tough crowd in Charlotte. Okay. Look, I think that this time they will somehow put the pressure on everyone to form a coalition to avoid that fifth election. I think if it goes to elections, it will just be debilitating. They talk about voter, fatigue and turnout, and look, we haven't had a government in Israel for 2 years now. Okay, Netanyahu refused to pass a budget in 2020 because there was not, it was all political and it was all an issue. So tons of civil society issues that depend on the bureaucracy functioning properly have not happened because of that. And I think that people are starting to get fed up. And so look, and we're kind of a prisoner of our own system. By the way, Likud yesterday blocked an attempt for there to be a direct election for prime minister. Okay, you notice that you vote for a party and not for an individual. They tried this in the 1999 election. There were 5 candidates for the prime ministership, and it kind of backfired. So I think that they will be able to pull off a coalition. But here's the thing about that, and what will they actually be able to get done? Because what we're going to see is it's a coalition of, remember what the big ideological issue is? It's a coalition of everybody who's anti-Netanyahu, okay? So we get that you're anti-Netanyahu, but what are you actually for? And how do you navigate between Avigdor Lieberman, who's the hard right Russian-speaking party, Naftali Bennett, who wants to annex anything that God promised us in the Torah, versus Nitzan Horowitz, who's the far left Meretz party, and Mirav Michaeli and Gilad Kariv on that end to try and come together around these issues. That is going to be very difficult and could potentially lead to political paralysis, in which the government would then fall 6 months later. However, I think that what those people have in common is that they can be reasonable. okay? And what I fear happening is that there could, because it's such a fragile coalition, it would be so narrow, 61 or 62 members, is that if one person gets upset, or they could bolt, and
Collapse.
what happens, and topple the government, vote of no confidence, and it would all fall apart, and we're back to square one again. So that's sort of why I imagine.
I think that for some reason it sounds echoey again. I don't know what's going on.
It's me whenever I'm on mute.
Okay, sorry. What I was going to say was that for whatever reason, it sometimes feels as though to your what you just said. I can't possibly imagine anyone ever getting upset at each other in the Middle East or with political parties. I can't possibly imagine that happening. So that's why it seems so fraught. Does anyone have any questions about the sort of reform conversion piece? Do you know if there's any cases that since the Supreme Court decision that the reform rabbin in Israel officiating any conversions? Did it start immediately after? Like what's happened in the couple months since? And you're on mute again.
There we go. Were you asking me or were you asking anyone else?
I'm sorry, Rabbi Weinberg. We'll ask you real quick.
Josh is fine. Yeah, whatever. Look, what's been happening since then is our rabbis' phones have been ringing off the hook of people wanting to now convert. Okay, that's huge. And we have a conversion program, and so that's moving and shaking. What we fear is that if there's a coalition, and we're all waiting for the coalition to happen so that we know what's going to be, because if there is a coalition with the ultra-Orthodox parties, what we fear is that the first thing that they will do is pass a legislative, bill, whatever, their legislative agenda, which will be called a chok okef bagatz in Hebrew, which will be an overriding law of the Supreme Court ruling, okay, which will overturn the Supreme Court ruling and get us back to where we are. So hopefully that's why, look, I don't want to be exclusionary, and we're pluralists, okay? That doesn't mean that we want everyone to be Reform Jews, okay? I love the rainbow of ethnicity and religious diversity that we have in Israel. And I love the fact that there are ultra-Orthodox Jews, and I think we need them, and that's critically important. However, we want to have our fair. We want it to be a democracy. We want it to be equal, and we want to have the same rights afforded to us as we have to everyone else, and that's what we're worried about. I'll answer briefly about the Temple Mount and the Palestinian riots.
Yeah, we have to wrap up.
And then we'll wrap up. Very quickly, Jerusalem is a tinderbox, okay? And I'm very worried about it. What we saw was, and I'll just put, by the way, it's wonderful to be with you. If you'd like to hear more, I write a column, it's like a blog piece about the weekly Torah portion and connecting it to Israeli politics somehow once a week. And I'm looking out at this group and I'm like, you know what you people need is one more email in your inbox on Friday mornings. I was like, that's what everybody could use. But feel free to subscribe to that, and I'll keep you updated. And we'd love for everyone to be a member of ARZA. That's how we are able to support both our Israeli reform movement and our Israel work here in North America. And we can talk to your leadership about that. And there's my email. Happy to correspond. I will just say this about Jerusalem is that what started from a few Palestinian teenagers making videos on the social media platform called TikTok, in which they were seen as attacking ultra-Orthodox Jews, like on the light rail train system, and erupted into a full-on riot egged on by the far right-wing group called Lehava. Okay, that was the leader of the Lehava, Benzi Gottstein, was one of the people that we barred from running in the Knesset, and that our Religious Action Center, not the one in Washington, but the Israel Religious Action Center, headed by Anat Hoffman and Rabbi Noah Satat, have won great court cases against, who they are, I would say they're not quite the Klan, the KKK, but they're a hate group that fights Arabs, that goes out and beats, goes out in the streets and beats up Arab teenagers after work, and is trying to instill fear in everyone. And you saw this huge posters chanting "Death to Arabs," running down Jaffa Road in Jerusalem, going to the Damascus Gate, which is in East Jerusalem, and that's what enters into the Muslim quarter of the old city. There's a wonderful op-ed this morning saying Damascus Gate is the next Tahrir Square, if you remember from Egypt from 2011, from Cairo. Tensions are very, very, very high right now in that. And I just want to give a shout out to our movement, who has been sort of calling them out and fighting against them. More to say about that. I would love to find time to come back and maybe one day in person to meet you all. Thank you for your time. If you have more questions, more things to discuss, I'm happy to correspond. And also Rabbi Knight has all of the answers as well. It's really wonderful to be with you all. And I want to wish everyone, is it too early to say Shabbat Shalom?
No, it's
wish you all Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Shavuot Sameach as it's coming up. And I just want to say, we need you. We need you to be passionate Zionists, to passionate supporters of Israel, and to stand up for our reform movement values of pluralism, tolerance, equality, all of those things. We need you in the States to run our social justice work, and that Rabbi Knight has been so involved in, and we need you in Israel also. So toda, toda, toda. And we will hopefully be in touch soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rabbi.
Shalom.
Bob, you want to, I don't know if you want to unmute and say a few words, but and to everyone, thank you so much for being here.
I got to jump. But,
all right, please do. Please do.
Thank you, Rabbi. Great talk, and we really appreciate it very much. And thank you, Rabbi Knight, for bringing him to us. And it's certainly a topic I know that most of us are going to continue to want to be updated on and are interested in, and affects our lives. I also, just before we break, I just want to as always, thank Natalie and Tracy for making Spice possible. And yes, clap, clap. And enjoy everything, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, y'all, about Texas. And I guess we break up now into groups.
All right, thanks.